right, so while you're finishing up breakfast, we're going to start. Thank you very much. Who brought the stuff?
Stuart and Susie did.
Oh.
Where are they?
Stuart is up with Rabbi Millen.
Okay. Well, thank you to Stu and Susie for bringing our bagels.
In absentia.
Yeah. Maybe if they watch the video, they'll hear that we thanked them. We thanked you, yes. And we obviously do think about those who provide for us.
Something's wrong with that thing.
Okay, today we arrived at the fourth bracha of Shemona Esrei. I'm sorry for the hiatus over Thanksgiving weekend, but I enjoyed it.
Where'd you go?
You're not going to get an excuse for Christmas weekend.
What?
You're not going to
No,
get an
this
excuse
week.
for
No,
Christmas
no,
weekend.
yes, we're fine. Actually, the next 2 weeks are going to be Hanukkah, so I think we'll talk about Hanukkah. Take a little break if you don't mind.
That's fine.
So, okay. The fourth bracha of Shemona Esrei can be found on page 102. We have Sidurim on the side here.
Thank you.
And now we have now finished the first three brachos. The first three brachos are the brachos of Shabach, of praising God, or describing His attributes, or of kind of characterizing Him. Again, for the purpose, I mean, why would we do that? Why do we praise God first?
You always start
You always think.
So yeah, so that's a good suggestion, and that people do bring that down, that perhaps, it's the polite thing to do. Before you walk up to someone and ask for favors, you should say, hey, Joe, you're a nice guy, I really like you. And by the way, can you do me a favor? As opposed to just walking up and saying, hey, give me something, So that's certainly just good manners and being polite, which is important behavior vis-a-vis the person we're corresponding with. It's also important because in Judaism, it's not just behavior alone is not sufficient, right? It's not just enough to do the right thing. We have to be the right kind of person, and that often is also the motivating factor behind our good manners and good character traits. It's not just because we think that's the right thing to do, but because we think that's the right. That will have an appropriate impact on us as people. And that's the right way to behave, meaning that's the right way to conduct ourselves and to develop our own characters. So, I'm going to add a layer. It's not just the polite thing to do because otherwise Joe won't do me a favor if I'm not nice to him first, right? It's nice to do because as people who develop and care about our characters, there's only one way to behave. Irrespective of whether Joe would think of it as polite or not, like he might say, I might look up to him and say, hey, do me a favor. And he'll be like, yeah, fine. Like, he won't even think of that as rude. That could be. And that's also, but it's important for me still to speak nicely and do the right thing because, for myself. And that, I think, is important to keep in mind when we talk to God. It's not, it's not just like buttering up the king. He's God. He doesn't really need our, what do you call it? Praise, but there's a more negative. When you suck up to your boss? What's that called? Flattering. He doesn't need us to flatter him, right? That's a bit.
Compared to sycophants.
Yeah. He doesn't need those things, right? But we need those things. We need to be able to approach God and first describe Him, paint a picture of Him, bring Him to life for us. Praise Him for our own characters and for our own state of mind, so that when we come to this section, the section of requests, we are in a more holy state of mind and a more moral state of mind as we approach God for these things. Okay, so now we're approaching God. Ata chonein la'adam das. This is on page 102. It's the bracha of. Well, we'll see. It's described as bina here in the article. Ata chonein, which means understanding. Ata chonein la'adam das. You, what's chonein? It's an interesting word. Chen is a word we all know.
Charm?
Horseradish.
That's chorein. Chen is like grace or charm, exactly. I would say grace is a bit more accurate. So ata chonein, you grace us not as a noun, but as a verb, right? Le'adam da'as, to man knowledge. You grace to man knowledge. You bestow knowledge upon us. Umelamed le'enosh bina. And you teach to mankind, enosh is a humanity. And you teach us understanding. Okay, so now we have two different words for knowledge. Das and bina. Not only do we have two different words for knowledge, we have two different, these are kind of parallel statements, these first two phrases, but they're different in important ways. God's verb in the first half is chonein. He bestows or graces us with something. The second one is milamed, teaches, which is much more familiar to us, right? Or much more common language for this kind of context in terms of our vocabulary. Then le'adam, to a person, das, knowledge. The next one is le'anosh, to humanity at large. And then it goes into the word bina, which is understanding. So we have to kind of pick these out. What are the differences here? Chanenu, then we ask a request. First of all, we're still just praising God, right? This is actually unique among the brachos. All the rest of the brachos in the request section begin with requests. Hashivenu avinu, return us. Look at the next one. Return us our Father. The next one. Salach lanu avinu, forgive us our Father. Next one. Re'eve onyenu, look at our impoverished state, our affliction, right? Then the next one, the next page. Rifa'enu, heal us. Barech aleinu, bless us. They all start off with requests. Here we don't get to the request until a full sentence in. Go back to page 102. We're just right now describing God. Ata chonei l'adam das, you give to man knowledge, umelamed le'enosh bina, and teach to humanity understanding. Then the request, chanenu me'etzcha de'a bina v'haskel. Please, see, it says, endow us graciously. Graciously endow us. Okay, so grace us with knowledge, right? Please grace us with knowledge, de'a, with knowledge, bina, understanding, v'haskel, and intellect. Okay? And then yeah.
The way it's written, translation, not the Hebrew part, the translation, it's written as a statement. It's not written as a question. It's not written as a request.
Well, you're saying that it's not put in the form of a question. Yes. You're right. It's not. This guy would be wrong on Jeopardy, but he's. But it's still. I think it's still a request. He's still saying, "And do something for us." You know, if I said, it's not. I guess you're right. Maybe it's more polite the way we talk. But if I say, "Harry, please toast me a bagel," it's not put in the form of a question.
There would be a question mark at the end, though.
No.
No.
I could say, "Could you?" If I said, "Could you please toast me a bagel?" That's a question. But if I say, "Please toast me a bagel," that's a statement, right? Or your wife says,
request.
"Harry, take out the garbage," right? So that is a request.
No, it's not.
It's also
that's a direct order.
but, no, but she's requesting something of you, right?
Well, it depends on who it is, I guess.
It's my
Barry,
wife.
say,
Yeah,
Depends on the tone of her voice.
right. You're saying they should all say
If you hear
please.
the icicles, you know you're in trouble.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, these are very forward. All of these requests are very forward. Grace us with knowledge, God. Return us to your Torah. They're not like, please do this, can you please, can we speak? It's actually interesting. Maybe this is something we have to address more, about the audacity of prayer. But I think you're certainly right. You're hitting on something very important. The Rav actually talks about this. It's almost like an impossible thing we're doing. We're approaching the infinite, all-powerful, all-good God. And by we, I mean our flawed, imperfect, recalcitrant selves, finite, right? And it's really inappropriate, if you think about it. And yet, not only are we allowed to do it, we have to do it. This is a mitzvah. So I think it's worth going over it, but not the time right now. But you're absolutely. I mean, what you're pointing out is something philosophically extremely important for Judaism and for our approach to prayer. So maybe another time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much we can really unless we do this for like 3 years, I'm not sure how much we're going to really cover, you know. But even then, I'm not sure how much we cover. All right. So, because it's only once, really, it's like 3 times a month. It's nothing, you know. Okay. Where was I? So we read the tefillah. Give us knowledge, give us understanding. So I think the first thing that we have to do is define the terms. And there's a lot of different, there are a lot of different approaches with regard to defining these different terms. There are other terms as well. There's one important one that we discussed already, 3 terms. Da'at, Bina, Haskel. There's another important one that we left off the list, which does not appear in Nusach Ashkenaz, but does appear in Nusach Sfard. Any guesses? For knowledge, like what's a good Jewish word for knowledge?
Seichel.
Seichel we have. That's Haskel. That's the last word of before the bracha part, before the end, the what's called the chosam, the bracha. We have Chanenu Meitcha Dea Bina v'Haskel. The root of Haskel is Seichel, exactly. Okay, so what else do we leave? That's good. What else do we leave off? It's easy. You guys are gonna like, I knew it. I knew.
Chachma?
Oh, very good. I was about to give a hint too. Chachma.
I have to really pull that out.
That's good. So actually, in Nusach Sfard, the bracha ends like this: Chanenu meitcha chachma bina vadat. And it reverses the order. Notice that in Nusach Ashkenaz, it's Dea Bina. First comes Da'at, then comes Bina, knowledge and then understanding. And in Nusach Sfard, it's reversed: Chachma, wisdom, Bina, understanding, then Da'at at the end. So these things are meaning. I'm not sure there's only one way of looking at it, but I have a couple approaches here, and that's the first section of the source sheet is what is knowledge defining the terms. So what is Da'at, what is Bina, what are these things? The first source that I have for you is from Sefer HaIkrim by Yosef Albo, or Rabbi Yosef Albo. Very, very crucial work about Jewish thought and belief. Sefer HaIkrim means what's Ikar is the essentials. So this is the book of the essentials. And he goes through, it's a couple volumes and 3 volumes, I think? I don't know, don't quote me on it. And this is from the first volume, very early in the book. So, Nitakna berchas ata chonen la'adam das umlamed le'enosh bina ki hamuskalos harishonos yikru das stam. So here, this bracha was established in the following way. It was established with da'as first, right? The term da'as appears first, for knowledge. I'm translating as knowledge. He says, Ki hamuskalos harishonos yikru das stam. The first inklings in our mind, right? The first level of knowledge, almost, like first fruits, right? When knowledge first appears in your mind, it's called das. It's called just knowledge, okay? So this is the first level of knowledge.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
What does that word actually mean? What's the root?
Dot, that's the dot is the word. It means knowledge. Like the Eitz Hadat, Tov Arad, like the tree of knowledge in Gan Eden.
Okay.
Now, De'ah is also, I would say Da'at is knowledge, and De'ah, with a hey at the end, is knowing. Okay? Yodea, Le'da is to know in Hebrew. Yodea is knowing. Okay? So Da'at here, Dalid Ayin Taf, that is the word. And he says, what is that? What kind of knowledge is that? Now, I didn't tell you this, but in education, actually, this is a very crucial philosophical issue. What is knowledge? Teachers all the time, what's the goal of teaching? It is to impart or create somehow knowledge in someone else. And if that's true, then you have to have some kind of an understanding of what knowledge is. Otherwise, your assessments for knowledge, testing, is entirely a waste of time. Right? Mm-hmm. So if a teacher doesn't know what knowledge is, then they won't know how to teach or how to assess. And over the last 100 years or so, a couple hundred years, there's been a lot of work in developing very nuanced categories of knowledge, and one of the fundamental contributions to the field has been Bloom's taxonomy. And he developed different realms of knowledge, primarily in cognitive, affective, and behavioral realms. So cognitive is very intellectual and cerebral stuff, like 1 + 1 is 2, it's cognitive. Affective is how much that's internalized and impactful on the person. I have 2 arms, look at, they're my arms, identify with the number 2, Then you have behavioral. Can you make 2 of things? Well, that's not really, I'm not sure that's really behavioral. Behavioral is more like, it's a skill. Can you say the word 2? Can you say the word, like teaching a baby, can you say the word 2? How do you get their tongue to hit the roof of their mouth just the right way, right? So, okay, and within each of these categories, each of these realms of knowledge, cognitive, active, affective, and psychomotor, or behavioral, so you have different levels of knowledge also. And that's, I think, what we're going to be analyzing here. Like, what are the levels of knowledge? Yeah. Okay, so here's a hint. So the Sefer HaGurus of Albo is teaching us his idea about the levels of knowledge. He says, first, when knowledge first hits your head, that's called das. That's just, plain old knowledge. Ve'amar u'melamed le'anush bina, then the bracha goes on to say that you teach to mankind, to humankind, to humanity, understanding, al yedias hotzas hatolada min hakdamos, shazei yikra bina. From that which derives from the first level from what precedes. And that's called understanding. Meaning if you can derive something from your knowledge, so first level of knowledge is just das. If you can derive something from that, extrapolate something, that's called bina. That's understanding. And these are things that actually we discussed today in education. I don't know, they use words, there's different levels. There's analysis, there's synthesis, there's comprehension. Can you derive, I guess deriving is, maybe that's part of analysis or application. Can you apply knowledge? These are all different, levels. Have a teacher just ask you for a spit back on a test, that may just be the first level of knowledge. But then to have them show you something you've never seen before, and say, apply the knowledge you have to this new scenario, that's application. That's a whole new level, right? That's a much higher level of understanding, we would say. So that's exactly what the Sefer HaGurus is saying. So das is first level of knowledge, and then there's bina, there's a real understanding. That's what we're praying for. We're praying for basic knowledge, and then we're praying for understanding, the ability to derive from that, and then to apply. And now Rashi has a different approach. Rashi actually has it switched. Look at, here is, this is a good trick question. Who is described as the smartest person in the entire Torah? So I'm using Torah very literally. Forget Tanakh for a second. He's in Tanakh, he's in the Nevi'im. Just the Torah, just the first 5 books.
Moses.
It's hollow.
So you might think, well, you always have right answers.
What?
No, it's okay. I always wanted them to guess more.
Oh.
No, you're right. Well, so
It was just a guess.
a lot of people would say Moshe, of course. He knew the entire Torah. He met God face to face. But the truth is, I'm a little bit misleading. It's not. I said most smartest, right? The Torah doesn't make a relative comparison. But the only time the Torah describes very thorough knowledge as belonging to anybody is with regard to Bezalel. When Bezalel is singled out as the head architect. Well, not just the architect, but really the artistic coordinator
Artisan.
for the construction of the Mishkan, God says, Va'amalei is the second source on the page from Shemos Lamed Aleph. Va'amalei so, God says, why is he a good choice? Because I have filled him, Ruach Elokim, with the Spirit of God, B'chokhmah, in wisdom, U'visfuna, and with understanding, U'vidas, and with knowledge, U'v'chol melacha, and with every kind of craft. So here we have the Nusach Sfard phrase, Chachma, b'chokhmah, in wisdom. B'tvuna, the shoresh of tivuna is bina, understanding, and then da. That's what, by the way, I just said it as if everyone knew, but maybe not. Chabad is an acronym. Stands for chokhmah, bina, dat. Wisdom, understanding, knowledge. And this is exactly where it comes from. Chokhmah, God says, I filled B'tzalel with chokhmah, tivuna, bina, understanding, dat, and with knowledge. So what are these things? Why there are 3 different words used for the same thing? Right? So Rashi says, on the 3rd source, B'chokhmah, in wisdom, ma sh'adam shomea me'acharim v'lamad. This is what a person hears from other people and learns. This is spitback knowledge, right? This is just, do you know all the statistics of the history of baseball or not? Did you memorize them or didn't you, right? Someone who did, he's a chacham, right? He knows a lot of stuff. Then there's tivuna, or bina. So what does Rashi says? Mevin davar milibo. He understands something from his own heart. Mitoch davarim shalamad. From the things that he learned. So he can take things that he learns and then understand, create a new level, create a new layer of knowledge. He can derive understanding from what he memorized, right? For instance, and this is, I think, the ability to apply knowledge and to extrapolate things, right? What would be a good example?
Inductive versus deductive reasoning.
Well,
If you cross against a light, you could get hurt.
yeah.
If you learn that and then you apply it.
Yeah, but you might apply it in different ways. Like, it would be, if, let's say you teach a kid, you have to look both ways. It's a good example. You have to look both ways because there might be, if you try running into the street, there might be a car and it will hit you. So if a kid now forever will never cross the street without looking both ways, that's good. That's the first level of knowledge. They've done exactly what you told them to do. Now the question is, can they take from there and extrapolate to other areas and apply it to other areas? Maybe now they'll be, they'll encounter some kind of like heavy machinery. So they might think, hang on a second, danger is something I should be aware of. Looking both ways in the street is not just because it's a street, it's because whenever danger might be an issue, I should take an assessment of my situation and first understand if it's safe for me to continue in my project, right? So you do the same thing in a dark alley, or they might, apply that knowledge too and say, maybe I shouldn't be here, maybe I should call for help, things like that. So I think that's understanding. That's what he's describing as understanding. Can you take what you know already and apply it to other areas? If I teach you how to find the shoresh in one word, maybe you can take a totally different word and find the shoresh in that one too. That kind of thing. So then, uvidat, and then with knowledge. And Rashi says, what is dat? Ruach HaKodesh. This is some kind of holy inspiration, okay, or divine inspiration. So we have simple memorization, being able to copy almost what you see or what you hear. There's understanding, deriving, applying what you know into other areas. And then dat is this entirely spiritual, almost like a prophetic, inspired, creativity, imagination, something like that. So B'tzalel was full of these things, and these are the terms according to Rashi. Now, dat, according to Rashi, is pretty lofty. And I think there's another slightly more accessible understanding of the word, or at least more earthly understanding of the word, and that comes directly. You can't be discussing the very phrase from which Chabad derives its acronym, its title, and not quote from the Likutei Amarim, the Baal Tanya, who was the founder of Chabad Hasidism, and that is the second to last source on the page. This is from the foundational work of Chabad Hasidism, from the Baal Tanya, written about 200 years ago, approximately. Ha-seichel kolel chachma bina vadat. So seichel, Perry, because you mentioned seichel, he says seichel is a very broad term, and it means intellect. It could mean any of the different kinds of knowledge, chachma, bina, or dat. V'hadat Hu milashon v'ha'adam yada es. So he describes chachma and bina very similar to how Rashi describes it. So I kind of skipped that part. I went right to das because das is where he really differs from Rashi. V'hadas hu milashon v'ha'adam yada es chava ishto. This is from the same phrase, same language. It's etymologically related to the word that is used to describe Adam and Chava having conjugal relations. Adam yada es Chava ishto. Adam knew Chava, his wife. V'hu lashon his kashrus v'his chabrus. It is a language of connection and attachment. Okay? So, shemikasher da'ato b'kesher amitz v'chazak me'od. That a person can tie his knowledge with a very strong and durable or formidable knot, v'yitalka b'machshavto, and it becomes stuck in his thoughts. So knowledge at this level is more than just knowing something that you can spit back on a test. It's more than being able to, or more intense at least, than being able to apply, derive and apply. But it's also to the point where it becomes thoroughly, almost intrinsically stuck in your mind, and it's I mean, just in terms of epistemology, like what does that mean? I don't think that what he's talking about is maybe not necessarily a new kind of knowledge, like a new level of knowledge, but it's the way knowledge is embedded in us, right? It's not so much a different kind of knowledge; it's a different kind of relationship to knowledge. Okay? Yeah?
What's the word stuff in Hebrew?
Well,
Or what's
the word here that I translated as stuck is yitaka. You see, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's the fifth line, the second to last word in the line. V'yitaka, takua, is like stuck in something. So it becomes like stuck in your thoughts, b'machshavto, in your thoughts. Hine, so let's go on. Hine im lo yikasher da'ato v'yitakam b'machshavto, I'm missing a little bit. For if you do not tie knowledge, right, tie it down and have it stuck in your thoughts, lo yolid b'nafsho yirah ve'ahava mitit, then it will not beget in your soul true fear and love, ki'im dimyonot, but only likenesses or similar things to that. Ve'alkein hadat hi kiyum hamidos, and therefore knowledge is it's what sustains our characters. Okay, so and this is the second. There's two steps to this. First, he says we have to relate to knowledge in a more intense way, right? To tie it and have it stuck in our thoughts. And then he says this will have an impact on our souls to arrive at true fear and love of God. And this is, I think, on a very simple level, very easy to understand. I can tell someone, and this is, I think, more related to what I said before, there's cognitive, there's behavioral, there's affective. Affective knowledge is something that Jewish educators, it's the hardest one to really teach and test for, and it's the most important one for Jewish educators overall. What our affective relationship is to our Jewish heritage and Jewish knowledge is very important. It's not just enough to know all the right answers. You can have someone who knows very well every story in the Torah, every halacha in the Shulchan Aruch, they know how to read Gemara very nicely, they know all the Tosfos in. That's nice, but actually they're atheists, and they don't like this, Like, that's not the goal of Jewish education. It's not just to know this stuff. It's that it should have a real impact on our lives and become something that guides us through life, that we really commit to, that we believe in, that leads to the love. You can say, like, yeah, any student can write on the test, yes, we are committed to both love and to fear God. Sign it off, get 100. That's not what true education's goal is, right? And not in the Jewish realm, at least. Not just to know that you have to love God, it's to love God, right? And how you develop that kind of love. So you have to, it takes a certain level of knowledge that really embeds this into our personalities, into our characters. Same thing with morality or good behavior. You can tell a kid to be polite. This is exactly how we started off, actually. you can, know how to be polite very well. It doesn't actually make you a caring, thoughtful, nice, giving person, right? There's a famous, see, I'm forgetting everyone's names today. There's a famous philosopher with an R, and honestly it's escaping me. He was a moral philosopher, and he was a professor in university, and it came out he was having an affair or something like that. He was acting immorally. So his students confronted him and said, "How could it be? You're a professor of morality. How can you not be a model of morality?" And he said, "If I were a math teacher, would I have to be a triangle? I'm giving you the knowledge. That's all I have to do, right?" But in Judaism, that's not the case. Having the knowledge alone is not enough. In religious realms, I don't think that's the case. Forget Judaism. Any religious realm, that's not the case.
Right. We have the same situation. I mean, we read, unfortunately, all the time, too often at least, of observant Jews who don't do the right thing.
Yeah, correct. It really raises important questions about what observance really is, or what religiosity really is. Certainly, and I think something that we should take out of this, is that doing all of the things, like just practicing, is not enough to make a person religious. In fact, what does religious mean, right? Religious is somehow, let's say, tied to God, or, something about God, right? Let's say. Now, you can have someone who just thinks it's a nice practice for life to do all the things that the Jews do. Whether Jewish or not, this person is, right? If it has nothing to do with God, and let's discuss this with tefillah also. You could say all the words of tefillah just because you might say, like, oh, the Jews have good luck, so I'll do the same thing, or I don't know, some excuse. If it has nothing to do with God in your own head and heart, that's not religion. That's not religious, right? So you can have, very long-bearded, black-hatted people. I'm not picking on black-hatted people, I'm just saying. People who might look ostensibly to anyone like they're very observant and very, religious. That's not what makes a person religious. It's what's inside that makes a person religious. Now, there are also, once a person has a religious, fervor on the inside, the external manifestations of our religious commitments are crucial and important. And perhaps the long beard and black hat are important, right? And other things like antak tzitzis and things like that, those are very important. But that's not the starting point. The starting point is internally. And that's what, or at least the end goal is internal. Maybe that's the better way of saying it. Maybe the end goal is actually internal. And that's the way that the Baal HaTanya is saying it too. He's saying there's knowledge and then there's understanding, right? And then, or there's wisdom and understanding, and then there's real knowledge. And real knowledge is the kind of knowledge that becomes internalized. And that will lead to the love, true love and fear. And not just the likeness of love and fear. That's what he says. There's a likeness of love and fear, then there's the real thing. And the real thing requires true knowledge, true deep knowledge. And that's actually very powerful. You might, these are referred to, this section of brachos that we're into are often referred to as the more mundane brachos. They're asking for our own personal requests, and it's true that our mundane requests are appropriate in this section. Let's say I have to take the GREs, SATs, some kind of test. I have, whatever it is. It's okay to pray to God and say, I need help on this test. Can you give me knowledge? Right? We acknowledge that this is a mundane request, at least on some level, because it's just my own personal need. It's not like I'm praying for the welfare of the Jewish people or something, But at the same time, I think that these tefillos are not just about mundane requests. One second. And the reason why we don't say them on Shabbos is because we don't ask for mundane requests on Shabbos. We don't ask for requests on Shabbos. So we exclude these things. But there could be a very spiritual layer to this as well. And I think that's what the Baal HaTanya is getting at. It's not just that we're praying for any knowledge. We're praying for the gift and skill to be able to arrive at true love and fear of God. Okay? And this brings us to not just what are these things, what is das, chachama, bina, right? What are these different kinds of knowledge, but what is the purpose? Why are we saying this tefillah? And that's the second section of the sources that we have, and hopefully we'll try to go through in good time. The bottom source on this first page is from Rav Kook. And Rav Kook, I think, is a very appropriately follows the Baal Tanya here, and we'll see. V'hinei, b'shah she'ha'adam osek b'inyanei ma'alos v'kedusha. At a time when a person is involved with matters and degrees or ascension in holiness, afilu loti, that's from the page, da'ato gdola nakel. Sorry, gdola. Even if his knowledge will not be, meaning his focus isn't that great, it's not, his knowledge or focus is not particularly overwhelming or noticeable or remarkable. Nakel hu sheyaseh dvarim l'tachlit hashlemut. It is still relatively simple, a simple matter for these things to be done for the purpose of completeness, right? Meaning, if you're let's say lighting Shabbos candles, but your mind is, let's say, not fully in it. So, okay, but it's still very clear to you, to everyone, that you're doing something spiritual. You're doing something holy. Like, even if your mind isn't on it, you're still clearly, you know that you're doing something holy, right? Or oftentimes in davening, like you daven and your mind is somewhere else, but you're involved in something holy, and that's easy. And that has an impact on you, even if you're not really fully focused, or you don't even understand fully what you're doing, but you're doing something religious, right? Aval, kisha osek b'inyanei chol, when you do something mundane, sarich da'a haguna l'shabda matachlis ha'me'ula. You need then appropriate knowledge in order to subjugate those activities for a lofty purpose, right? It doesn't come automatically if you're just eating lunch, or if you're, playing baseball. These things actually require a great degree of knowledge and focus in order to derive some spiritual benefit out of them. Alken, b'tchilas brachos shel chol. Therefore, at the very beginning of the brachos of chol, of these mundane brachos, or of the weekday brachos, kishayotzi minyanei kedusha, when we depart from the matters of holiness, the first three brachos, right, of describing God, of praising God, we just said a bracha of kedusha, of describing God's holiness, and now we're going into our own mundane needs. Uponim li'inyanei hacholin, and now we are turning to the matters of mundane activities. Tzurichim lahakdim brachas hade'ah. Then we have to first lay out the bracha of knowledge, to advance the bracha of knowledge first. The tefillah and its prayer. She'az gam inyanei hachol kedoshim he. Because through knowledge, then even mundane matters can become holy. So that's why we pray for the knowledge first. We pray for the correct mindset and for the ability to embed and internalize knowledge of God, awareness of God, love and fear of God, in order so that the rest of our activities can be infused with holiness as well.
Yeah, we do that on Shabbos in the prayer for knowledge. When we say that we're asking for knowledge so that we can tell the difference between the mundane and the holy.
Oh, after you're saying moti after Shabbos.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we'll get there too. Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely right.
That's all.
You're absolutely right. Hang on 1 second. You're two sources ahead of me. Yes.
You answered.
Oh, okay. So, and this is actually, the one time that I thought of that we actually have an example of someone praying for knowledge. This prayer in Tanakh was exactly like you said, Pilar, by Shlomo. And here we have the second source on the second page is from Melachim Aleph, at the very beginning, where Shlomo takes over as being the king, and he's offered by God. He's like, God becomes his magic genie. He says, ask something. I'll give it to you, right? So here we have the first passage. Begivon nira Hashem al Shlomo. Hashem came to Shlomo in Givon b'chalom halayla. in a dream in the night. Vayomer Elokim sha'al ma atein lach. Ask for what I will give to you. So what would you ask for? Right? This is like classic. Half of literature is about this, you know. So a few psukim later, Shlomo first says, there's a whole preamble, like we have a preamble, there's a whole preamble, and then he finally comes to his request. 4 psukim later, in Pasuk Tes, V'nasata la'avtecha lev shomea. Give to your servant a hearing heart. Lishpot es amcha, in order to judge your people. Lehavin, in order to understand, to bein tov l'ra, between good and bad. Ki mi yuchal lishpot es amcha hakaved hazeh, for who can really judge your people unless you have true understanding? And this is crucial. He says bein tov l'ra. This is exactly how we start off our entire davening, actually. We start off the brachos, our first bracha that's not like brachos HaTorah or the brachos we have in Brachos HaShachar on page 18. Very first bracha on page 18 is Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Asher Nasan Lasechvi Vina. Blessed are you, Hashem, King of the world, who has given to my knowledge understanding, lehavchin bein yom uvein laila, in order to understand between night and between day, or to discern between night and day. Now, why is it important to thank God for discerning between night and day? In fact, it used to be that we didn't say these brachos all in a row in the morning like this. It used to be these brachos were actually assigned to different moments of waking up in the morning. For instance, the one about Zokef Kefufim, straightening out people who are bent over. This was said when you got out of bed, when you stood up and straightened up. Or Sha'asali Kol Sarki, you've made for me all of my needs. This used to be said when we put on our shoes in the morning. Because our shoes, it's a very, very deep idea. But when was this bracha said? That I got to discern between night and day? That was said when you heard the roosters crow in the morning, right, at sunrise. So now, if you ever lived in Washington Heights, like I did, and my dorm for the first few years in YU was against a courtyard, faced an inside courtyard, which I preferred because otherwise the street noise is so loud all night long, it's insufferable. And there's no air conditioning in the boys' dorms, or there wasn't when I was a student, so you had to leave your windows open during warmer weather, and it was impossible to sleep on the street side. So I fortunately got a room on the courtyard side. But the problem with the courtyard side is that our neighbors behind the dorms weren't YU students. They were just people who lived in the Heights. And sometimes these people owned things like chickens and roosters. And for what purpose, it was not totally clear to us, but we had our guesses. And the thing with roosters is that most people think that roosters crow very politely only when the sun rises. It's not the case. Very much like my child, these things scream and cry whenever they're awake at night. So, if it was at 2, then it was at 2 that the thing crowed. If it was at 4, then it was at 4, Okay, so, whatever. The point is, but the bracha is still for when you hear the crow in the morning. Why? Why is that an important bracha to make? Why is this our first bracha? Forget
Knowledge
that.
to distinguish between day and night.
Why is that important?
Don't know.
I'm asking. Yeah, like Pilar?
I will say it's important because supposedly every time we go bed, we actually die. And the soul goes with God. And when we wake up, it's the heart who has the understanding it's daytime now, it's time to wake up. So that's something that
So you're saying that it's our discerning, perhaps, that brings back the neshama into the body in the morning.
And it's the heart.
Interesting. Maybe? Yeah, Joe?
I was going right in line with her.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. That's very creative. I never heard that before.
I was thinking,
I'm working
So,
on
oh, go ahead.
Same thing? Wow.
Same thing, I was thinking like modani, when you thank God for restoring your soul from the night before. So same
Interesting.
idea.
Wow.
What was the first thing you say when you open your eyes?
Well, if it's consensus, it must be right. I mean, I'll write it down. I was thinking something different. Hang on a second. Yeah.
Could it have something to do with when we wake up in the morning, that's us, or this is more communal?
You're saying that was an individual. Yes and no,
Yeah.
actually. I mean, these are we'll learn these one day, but these are complicated because they're not quite individual. They're not quite as individually motivated brachos. They're really, I mean, let's say a person, we'll talk. Like, let's say a person, God forbid, is in a wheelchair all day. So do they say the brachas Zokev Kefufim? Who makes straight the bent over? They don't stand up. Do they make that bracha? Or does a person who's blind say Pokeach Ivrim, who opens up the eyes? So we'll get to that. So it's not quite individual. It might be that they say it anyhow, because it is a group bracha. Yeah.
Well, I always thought this meant that it's like you know how we're supposed to wake up with a lion-like reserve, like to tackle the day. But I was thinking in the daytime, in the nighttime, we don't really do mitzvot. I mean, we're sleeping.
Yeah. Well.
So I was thinking it had something to do with we should know that this is the time to get up and start serving Hashem.
Yeah, I always understood this as being symbolic, not to discern between night and day literally, but be able to discern between right and wrong,
Good
right?
and bad, yeah.
Between good and bad.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Exactly.
Night and day, yeah. I mean, that's
Exactly.
because that's what
And
it relates to sometimes.
Right.
in
The
literature.
discerning is a gift that can be applied to night and day. That's true, but that doesn't give us very much. I mean, maybe it does, because you guys actually developed a very beautiful idea. But it's a skill that can be applied to right and wrong, to God's ways and not God's ways. And that's, I think these first brachot are really about fulfilling mitzvos. And I think that's where it's going. We'll get to that one day, but we have to wrap it up. And that, I think, is why, Stu, we put Havdalah in this bracha. Look at Mariv. The Shemona Esrei of Mariv on page 268. This is the weekday Mariv. Every Motzei Shabbos, when we say this, there's a gray box in the middle of this whole bracha. We say, Ata cholen l'adam da'as, you give to people knowledge, the first line, you give to humanity understanding. Then there's a whole little Havdalah service right in the middle here for Motzei Shabbos. Ata chonantanu lemada torasecha. You, same kind of language. You have graced us. Limada is a strange word, but we'll just say with knowledge of the Torah. V'atzlamdenu la'asos chukei ratzanecha, and you've taught us to perform the laws of your will. V'atavdel Hashem Elokeinu bein kodesh l'chol, you have divided Hashem our God between holy and mundane, bein or l'choshech, between light and dark. See how these things are connected? Right? We thank God for discerning between night and day. This is also a connection between holy and mundane, between light and dark. Bein Yisrael la'amim, between the people and the nations. Bein Yom HaShvi l'sheishes and Yom HaAseh, between the seventh day, Shabbos, and the 6 days of work. Avinu Malkeinu is a prayer. Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King. Hachel aleinu ha'ba'im l'krasenu. Also a difficult word, but we'll go with initiate, let's say, or bring to a start these days that are coming to greet us. L'shalom, for peace. Chasuchim mikol chait, empty of all sin. Umenukim mikol avon, and cleansed of all iniquity. Umedubakim b'yirasecha, and stuck, like attached to your fear. And then we go on 1 second, and then we go on to the rest of the bracha. Chanenu meitcha dei abina vaskel, and then give us knowledge, understanding, and intellect. So what does these have to do with each other? Yeah.
I always interpreted it as having to do with Bereshit, separating between day and night,
Yeah.
between the peoples, between the sea and the land, between the 6 days and the seventh day. I always interpret that as being Bereshit, and then because when when the 10 utterances are repeated twice in the Torah, once is remember the Sabbath day, keep it holy, and Sabbath day, keep it holy. And the other one is remember the Sabbath day because I removed you out of the land of Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
So, I always took that as having to do with Bereshit, not necessarily.
Well, yes, Perry, but I think it's much more than that, even. Because the notion, like, what is Havdalah anyhow? Why do you have to do Havdalah after Shabbos ends?
To separate between.
Separate.
Why is that an important thing to do?
That's how we signify everything, whether it be a kos with some wine in it, or it's with a candle.
Well, I think it is as fundamental as you're saying. I think Havdalah, being able to separate, first of all, that was the work of creation. Rashi says that God created everything on the first day. And the rest of the days of creation, he simply separated them out. Right? That creation itself was through the dividing of things. And not only that, and you see actually that's very explicit in the first few days of creation. But then when it gets to the last few days, the separating isn't as obvious anymore. God separates the firmaments, and he separates land from water, light from dark. But
It took a lot of energy to do those things. By the time the 6th day came...
Well, between animals, there's no explicit separation between animals or between people. So actually, we don't really come to that. I believe that actually we get back to it in Vayikra. After Nadav, and we've spoken about this in the past and in the Parsha here, but after we build the Mishkan, which Batzalel will, right, envision and lead. After the Mishkan is built, finally we start to put it up. Nadav and Avihu, on the very first day that we actually use it for its real purpose, Nadav and Avihu go in and kill themselves. Not suicide, but they get themselves killed, right? However it is. And immediately afterwards, the Torah is obsessed for the next 6 parshios with separating. Immediately, God tells Aharon that the purpose of the Kohanim is lahavdil, bein hakodesh u'bein hachol, to separate out between a tamei and a tahor, and between pure and impure, between holy and mundane, between pure and impure. And then immediately we have the laws of kashrus, which tell us which animals are pure and which are impure. And the Parsha Shmini. And the end of that parsha, it repeats again the refrain lahavdil, to separate. And not just to separate the food, but God says, va'avdil eschem min ha'amim lihiyos li, and I will separate you from the nations to be mine. Okay? This, I think, is the division of the animals that we didn't get in the creation story. But we get it in the laws of kashrus, the division of the animals between pure and impure animals. And the purpose of that is to help us divide between holy and then that parsha is followed by the parshios of Tuma and Tahara, of people, of negaim, of blemishes and things like that. Tazria, Mitzora, right? Of tzara'as and of emissions, of different kinds of purity and impurity in people. So the purity and impurity of animals is followed by the purity and impurity of people, which are both the divisions that we were missing in the creation story, and that is exactly the response to what? To Nadav and Avihu's failed attempt at using the Mishkan. In other words, the ability to divide, to discern between holy and mundane, between pure and impure, is the essential tool we require in order to abide the presence of God living among us in the Mishkan. This is a very long idea that I'm kind of squeezing in at the very end here, but that, I think, is the reason why we have exactly what you said, the creation theme, which is, essentially what Shabbos is about, but it ends off with with a prayer of division, or of separating, so that we have, and this is tied to our knowledge, and we pray for the knowledge to be able to discern between holy and mundane, and to even not just to acknowledge and to observe those distinctions, but to even create those distinctions by creating holiness in life. And that's why this is wrapped up at the end of Shabbos in the prayer for knowledge. And that's exactly what the Gemara says. The Gemara Brachos, the third source on the page, Rabbi Yeshua Omer Me'ein. Oh wait, we'll look at that. The fourth source on the page is also from Brachos. Havdalah b'chonin hadas. We learn that Havdalah has to be put into this bracha, the bracha of God giving us knowledge. My taima, why? Amar Rav Yosef, Rav Yosef says, Mitoch shehi chachma kavuha b'berachas hachachma. It is wisdom, and so it appears in the bracha of wisdom. But I think the much deeper understanding of this is exactly what we've just been developing. That being able to just, because it connects back to Rav Kook's ideas and Rav Baal Tanya's idea, that this knowledge is not just knowledge for knowledge's sake, or knowledge because we want, give us smarts, make me smart. Not just about that. It's about you being able to reach the level of knowledge that is useful in the service of God, and that's what Havdalah and knowledge in general enables us to do. Now, this, by the way, so I've developed that idea. We're going to skip the third source. The last source on the page is, I think, important. This is from the Sifsei Chaim, which is a very recent book written by Reb Chaim Friedlander. It's very popular among many, many people. And he has a book on Biur Tefillah, on explaining the Tefillah, and he has an approach to Das that is the following, which is very consonant with what we just said, and I think also, but there's a new idea here. Yitachen sheyeh la'ad, the last source. Yitachen sheyeh la'adam yedios rabos b'sichlo. People have many different kinds of knowledge in their intellects. Aval hem rak yedios chitzonios. But they're oftentimes they're external kinds of knowledge. Ve'inam nogos klal l'pnimiuso. And they do not connect with or reach our internality, right? Our internal selves. Aval das, but true knowledge, hu ka'asher adam mehakel es hayadiyah. This is when a person really ingests or digests knowledge, bikirbo, in his gut, umizdaheh ita legamre, and identifies with it entirely. We call this internalization, right? To internalize knowledge. V'hi chaya umuchashisbo, and it lives in him. It's tangible in him. V'hu misnaheg al piha, and therefore he conducts his behavior according to that knowledge. Kakasuv yadata hadas. Kakasuv, it says in Devarim, V'yadata hayom v'hashivos elavavecha. You will know something today, says the pasuk in Devarim, and then you will return to your heart. Why? What do you mean? What does knowledge have to do with teshuvah? It says hayidiyah hadas, this knowledge, this knowing, mivia lehashava el halev. This brings one to return to one's heart, lichyos al pizeh, to live according to it. V'hamadrega ha'alyona shel das, the highest level of knowledge, hi madregas b'tzalel. This is the level of B'tzalel. Shadvarim chakukim bo b'madregas ruach hakodesh. The knowledge was engraved in him. Chakuk is engraved. Chok is a law, right? It means law, but it means law because it's engraved. So chakuk is engraved, like written in stone, like the tablets, right? They were engraved in him as holy inspiration. Dahainu havana v'hasaga pinimis mushlames. It's internal, complete understanding. Hamekifa es kol tochen hadavar lo'umko, which really encompasses all of the content and substance of something to its depth. And philosophically, we actually talk about, like, there's different kinds of belief in God. And the kind that we strive for is what Cardinal Newman refers to as real assent. Real assent. There's different kinds of knowledge. Like there's, we described 1 and 1 is 2 earlier, right? So that's a belief I have. I believe that 1 and 1 is 2. Is it a belief that I go to war over? No. Is it a belief that I live by? No. I mean, it affects my life. It certainly applies in my life. I don't live by it, right? It's an idea. I could take it or leave it. If tomorrow it changed to 3, I don't care, right? But there are other beliefs where that's not the case. Like, for instance, the belief that, the belief in love for someone. Or in love for an idea, sometimes. There are certain ideas, there are certain relationships that we would go to war over. That really I wouldn't take it or leave it. That really do impact the way I live my life because I live my life by those ideas and those beliefs. That's what we want. We don't believe in God to be mathematical. Yeah, I believe in God. He exists. I know. Right? It should be more than that. It should be something that you have real assent, that it's something you live by. It's engraved in your heart and on your soul. And that's a different kind of knowledge. And this is the kind of knowledge I think that he's, and this is exactly to feel, not just to be able to discern, let's say, between holy and mundane, right? But to be able to know it in your heart. To be able to like go through life and just feel like there's a great moment when I've spoken in the past in this forum about the deficiencies of the Harry Potter series. But one very good example of success is when Dumbledore and Harry go looking for an important artifact with regard to Voldemort. Okay, so they're in a dangerous position. They're in a cave and they're alone. And the rules of magic that Harry had studied so in some ways assiduously, but in some ways really not, in school, do not apply. Dumbledore lets go of the rules and just feels with his soul, with his heart, for the traces of magic in the room, for traces of evil and traces of good. It's a very powerful moment, and I think that's exactly what we're trying to get at. The ability to just, that it's so internal that we become like antenna for holiness. And it really just flows through us, and it conducts, this knowledge becomes the motivating force behind the way we live our lives. And I think that's the absolute apex of knowledge, and I think just one more, because we don't really study the prayer of Hannah enough, I think it's worthwhile bringing this in. She prays before for a son, for Shmuel, and she prays after the son. She thanks God. And she says, there are a lot of interesting parallels between this and Shemona Esrei, which maybe one day we'll go through. But she says, she prays about knowledge. Ki kel deos Hashem, she says. God is the God of knowledge. And that's the whole phrase I was going to read to you. But I think that there's another aspect of knowledge here that a lot of commentaries do discuss, not necessarily as explicitly as I'll say it right now, but I think it relates also to the language here. There's a kind of knowledge that I think we have to see. Everything that I said now is knowledge that I think we relate to. There's some knowledge I think that we don't relate to at all. That's God's knowledge. When we say Kikel Deos Hashem, that God is the God of knowledge, we have to acknowledge that God's level of knowledge is totally, the potential of it is totally beyond human capacity, right? There might be an aspect of this prayer where we want a glimpse of God's knowledge, right? We're asking for a glimpse of God's perspective. And that might be actually what we mean by this. Ata chonem l'adam das. You grace us with knowledge. That word, the Christians use the word grace to describe God's presence or God's impact in a way that's totally beyond comprehension, right? Why should some people feel God and others not? It's grace. So in some ways, I think we're also asking for a gift, a grace, something that we would never be able to achieve, no matter how hard we studied and thought and derived and analyzed and practiced and internalized. Even if we do get to a point of knowledge that conducts our lives, that motivates our lives, it's not necessarily the kind of knowledge that God has, and even beyond our own, I wouldn't say normal or common, but a very human understanding between good and bad, between holy and mundane. We want God's understanding for these things, not our own. We want God's understanding, not human understanding. And that's what we say, Ata chonem l'adam das. There are some things that he teaches us, melamed le'enosh bina, that he teaches to mankind. And that may be more understandable and more human. But for God to grace to man knowledge, I think is almost asking for knowledge beyond human knowledge, perspective beyond human perspective, to see the world through God's eyes. And I think that is also something we ask for when the Baruch ultimately ends, chonen hadas, to grace us with knowledge. And I think that's something that we strive for as well. Yeah.
I was just thinking when, I don't know if this would be an example or not, but when you were talking about, internalizing certain concepts and living by them. So what comes to my mind is the story of like the fiery furnace with Avraham, who goes in and comes out, totally unscathed. When his brother tries to do it, he dies instantly.
Mm-hmm. But you're saying because the people were not again, right, like maybe Haran,
He did it because he saw Avram and he says, hey, if he can do it and I say that I believe in Hashem,
right,
so
he
then
believed, but it wasn't like real.
it wasn't internalized.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you a little more about the reference you made to Teshuvah.
Mm-hmm.
And you said, "Will return to your heart," and today, it's in the last source.
Mm-hmm.
When you said the word Teshuvah, is that real Teshuvah?
Yeah, that's what teshuva means. That's exactly what it means. It means to return. It's an interesting word, right? What's a Baal Tshuva, right? So you say someone's a Baal Tshuva if they grew up totally, unobservant, unaffiliated, and then they become, observant. So I say that's a Baal Tshuva. So you might say that's not returning to something, that's discovering something altogether new. But really what this is saying is that, no, we were built, designed, and created with a de facto status quo position, right? Our souls, started from God. And to return is to return to God as well. When we come on the earth is a departure from where we started. That earth is not where we started from. Earth is the departure. Returning to God happens no matter where you start from on earth. We all started from the same place.
So that comes from Deuteronomy too?
Yeah, well, the major parsha of Teshuvah is there, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, in the very beginning of class, we were talking about when we say when we're saying the beginning, Shemona Esrei, we're praising God, and why are we praising Him? So I was just thinking that when you have gratitude, you open your heart, and so really couldn't it be that we're praising Him because we want our heart to be open so that we have more das when we're saying the bracha, like we're really, that's really
in fact there's a Gemara. Yeah, there's a Gemara that God will not give people knowledge to people who don't have knowledge.
Right.
In other words, there has to be which is a bit of a paradox. If I don't have knowledge, how can I get it? Because God won't give it to me.
Right.
But yeah, I think you're saying you have to. There has to be a preparation for knowledge and for understanding.
Right,
and if you're not open to it, if you're not, in terms of your character and in terms of your spirit, if you're not open to it, then it'll be impossible for God to give it to you.
And then again, it's not just to be ready and prepared to receive the knowledge and have all the knowledge if I'm not going to leave a single point of what God is teaching me. So
right.
that knowledge become in vain if I know all Torah and all halacha and I'm living my life not according to Torah.
Yeah.
So that's the act. When you're really living what you're living what you're preaching.
Yeah. I agree.
I just find it interesting that, that we're talking about knowledge, which in our modern day, we always think of our brain power and stuff, but here they're referring more to our heart.
Yeah. The truth is there's two different things to say. First of all, the history of people's perception of the location of the brain is very fascinating, like which organs reside in. Some people do talk about the head, some the heart, some the lower organs, like the innards, like liver and kidneys and things. And even in Tanakh, this appears. So, that first of all is an interesting history anyhow. Where is the brain? Where is the mind? That's first of all. Second of all, like I said, there are different kinds of knowledge, right? And I think that any educator today acknowledges that there are certain kinds that are emotional and affective, not just cognitive in the head, but affective, almost in our souls and hearts. And I think that that may be also something that's at work here.
Yeah, because you mentioned that there's also gut.
Yeah.
You mentioned.
Yeah,
Thanks,
So I just
Rosa.
have a
Thank you,
question.
Brenda.
sure.
When you were reading the first paragraph, we actually, Bina, Chachma,
Yeah.
is actually in Torah. So,
Yes,
so when in Kabbalah, when it comes all the Sephiros, it's actually the pattern from Torah.
correct. Yeah. I think that a lot of times you'll see Kabbalistic ideas, I think do reach back to, look, I think everything reaches back to the Torah. Okay? And I haven't studied Kabbalah, not even
You're
not even
enough.
not thoroughly, meaning not really studied Kabbalah ever. But from the little that I know about it, I do think that there are many of its fundamental concepts do reach back to the Torah. Yeah.
Because you're not 40 yet.
Well, that's also true. That's also true. Okay, very good. Have a good week.
Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you.
Thank you.